Imagine being asked to sacrifice everything you've waited decades for. Today, we're climbing Mount Moriah to explore one of the most challenging stories in religious history, where a father's faith met the ultimate test. We'll unpack the profound lessons about trust, sacrifice, and divine provision that still resonate today.
You know what makes this story so powerful is that it wasn't just any sacrifice. This was Isaac, Abraham's only son of promise, the one he'd waited 25 years to have.
And there's something really striking about that word only, isn't there? Because technically, Abraham had another son, Ishmael.
Exactly. The text specifically calls Isaac his only son, because as far as God's covenant was concerned, Isaac was the sole heir of the promise. And here's something fascinating. This is actually the first mention of love in the entire Bible.
Wait, really? The first mention of love in the Bible appears in this story?
Yes. When God says, "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love." It's significant that the first mention of love in Scripture appears in the context of a father being asked to sacrifice his son.
That's incredibly powerful symbolism. Tell me about the location, Mount Moriah. Why there specifically?
Well, Mount Moriah would later become one of the most significant locations in religious history. It's actually where Solomon's temple was eventually built in Jerusalem.
So this wasn't just any random mountain?
Not at all. And you know what's interesting? The journey there took 3 days. Abraham had all that time to think about what he was about to do.
3 days? That must have been excruciating. How did he even explain it to Isaac?
The text tells us that Isaac noticed something was missing. He says, "Father, here's the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for the offering?"
And Abraham's response is pretty remarkable, isn't it?
Absolutely. He says, "God himself will provide the lamb." It's a statement of profound faith, but it's also prophetic in ways Abraham couldn't have understood.
Let's talk about that prophetic aspect. This story seems to point to something bigger, doesn't it?
Yes, and this is where it gets really interesting. The parallels to Christ's sacrifice are striking. Just as Isaac carried the wood for his own sacrifice, Jesus carried his cross.
And both involved a father being willing to sacrifice his son.
Exactly. But there's a crucial difference. While God stopped Abraham, there was no intervention when Jesus was sacrificed. He was the ultimate fulfillment of what this story pointed toward.
You mentioned earlier about the cultural context of this story. What was happening in Canaan at this time?
This is really important context. Human sacrifice was actually common among the Canaanite religions. Their gods often demanded child sacrifice.
Oh, wow. So this request would have seemed almost normal?
In a way, yes. But the end of the story reveals that Yahweh was fundamentally different from these pagan gods. He provides the sacrifice himself. He doesn't actually want human sacrifice.
Let's talk about the nature of this test. What was God really testing here?
According to the biblical scholars, this wasn't a test to produce faith. It was a test to reveal faith that had already been built in Abraham over many years.
That's a crucial distinction.
Right. God had been building Abraham's faith piece by piece, year by year. This was the moment that would reveal what had been developed.
And Abraham's response is immediate, isn't it? When God calls, he simply says, "Here I am."
Yes, and that response, "Here I am," meant he was ready to be taught, ready to obey, ready to be examined by God.
The text mentions that Abraham got up early the next morning. No delay, no arguing.
That's right. It's what scholars call faith that walks. Not loud or flashy, just quiet, determined obedience.
But surely he must have been wrestling with this internally?
The text suggests he believed God could even raise Isaac from the dead if necessary. His faith was in God's character and promises.
Let's talk about the moment of provision, the ram in the thicket.
This is where Abraham's earlier statement proves prophetic. God did provide the sacrifice, and Abraham names the place, "The Lord will provide."
And that name stuck, didn't it?
Yes, the text tells us that even generations later, people would say, "On the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided."
What strikes me is how this story combines both incredible faith and incredible promise.
Absolutely. After this test, God reaffirms his covenant with Abraham, promising descendants as numerous as the stars and sand.
And this mountain, Moriah, it became pretty significant later, right?
Yes, about 1,000 years later, King David purchased this same site for an altar, and his son Solomon built the temple there.
So it became the center of worship for generations.
And it still is. Today, it's known as the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, one of the most significant religious sites in the world.
Let's talk about Isaac's role in all this. He wasn't just a passive participant, was he?
No, and this is important. He was old enough to carry the wood up the mountain and understand what a sacrifice involved.
So he must have been willing to submit as well.
Exactly. It's a picture of generational faith, both father and son trusting in God's character.
You mentioned earlier about this being the first mention of love in the Bible. Why is that significant?
It sets up a profound theme that runs through Scripture, that true love involves sacrifice. It points forward to God's ultimate expression of love through Christ.
And it's specifically father-son love that's mentioned.
Yes, which makes the parallel to God the Father and Jesus even more striking.
What do you think this story teaches us about the nature of faith?
It shows that real faith isn't just intellectual belief, it's trust that leads to action, even when the path doesn't make sense.
And about the nature of testing.
Divine testing isn't about breaking us, it's about revealing what's already been built in us through our relationship with God.
It's interesting how this story continues to resonate with people thousands of years later.
Because it touches on universal themes: trust, sacrifice, love, provision. These are things every human heart grapples with.
And it challenges our assumptions about faith, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It shows that faith isn't about having all the answers, it's about trusting the one who does.
As we wrap up, what do you think is the main takeaway from this ancient story?
That in our deepest tests, God sees, God knows, and God provides, just as he did on Mount Moriah.
And he's still providing today.
Yes, though perhaps not always in the ways we expect.
Like Abraham, sometimes we just have to climb the mountain, trusting that God will reveal his provision along the way.
And remember, the test itself isn't the end of the story. It's often just the beginning of a deeper understanding.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode of Co-Pilot Podcasts. Remember, sometimes the greatest revelations come on our own mountains of testing, where trust meets provision.